Lions Nation, what a game! It felt like destiny and determination collided on the field. Our Detroit Lions didn't just win, they made a statement. Against the league's #1 defense, we didn't just stand tall, we took control and dominated. It was a complete team performance. Offense, defense, and special teams all answered the call. This is the kind of game that silences critics and makes the entire NFL take notice. But here's the best part. This team still isn't satisfied. They know there are adjustments to make, more chemistry to build, and plenty of battles ahead. Now I want to hear from you. Do you believe this team has what it takes not just to win the NFC North, but to make a deep playoff run? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps strengthen our Lions fan community. Let's go, Lions. It felt like one of those games where everything aligned, but at the same time, it also revealed the grit and resilience of this Detroit Lions team. Beating the Cleveland Browns 34-10 is not just another victory to mark in the win column. This was a battle against the league's #1 ranked defense, a unit praised all season for shutting down opposing offenses, and yet the Lions went toe-to-toe with them and came out looking stronger than ever. Think about it. 27 offensive points scored, plus a game-changing special teams touchdown. If you can score that kind of output against the best defense in football, you can score against anyone. That's the type of performance that gets the attention of the entire NFL. This wasn't a game won by luck or fluke plays. It was built on turnovers, discipline in the trenches, and clutch execution across all 3 phases of football. The Lions forced 3 turnovers and turned them into 17 points, showing once again that this defense doesn't just stop opponents, it creates opportunities. And when you combine that with a special teams unit finally coming alive, Khalif Raymond returning a kick for a touchdown after a slow start to the year, you get a complete team effort that silenced critics and energized fans. The curious part? Jared Goff versus Jameson Williams. Something was off. The timing, the rhythm, the chemistry. None of it clicked in this game. Balls were dropped, routes misaligned, and the interception Goff threw only highlighted the disconnect. But here's where the story takes a twist.
Despite the offensive miscues, Goff was never sacked. Let me repeat that. 0 sacks allowed against Myles Garrett and the Browns' elite pass rush. That alone tells you the Lions' offensive line is proving why it's among the best in the NFL. Taylor Decker, Penei Sewell, Graham Glasgow, and the rest of that unit took some hits but never broke. 0 sacks. That's not just good, that's historic against this kind of defensive front. Meanwhile, the running game quietly carved out its own highlight reel. Jahmyr Gibbs put up 91 yards on 15 carries with a touchdown, showing bursts of speed and vision that the Browns simply couldn't contain. David Montgomery wasn't featured heavily this time, but the plan was clear: exploit the edges with Gibbs' speed, and it worked. When a team can rack up over 100 rushing yards against the most respected front 7 in football, you know it's something special. Then there's Amon-Ra St. Brown. 2 touchdowns, 7 catches, 70 yards, classic Sun God production. He continues to be the heartbeat of this passing attack. And even though the Goff to Jameson connection sputtered, St. Brown once again proved he can be the difference maker in tight games. He's the guy who bails the offense out when things stall, and against Cleveland, he did exactly that. But as always, every win has its costs. Injuries became the dark cloud hanging over this victory. Terry and Arnold went down and never returned. DJ Reed's hamstring scare looked worse in real time than the diagnosis afterward, but hamstrings are tricky and can linger longer than expected. St. Brown himself took some knocks but pushed through. It all seemed like the byproduct of a short week. The team just looked beat up and worn down. Thankfully, none of the injuries appear to be catastrophic, but it's a reminder that the season is a marathon, not a sprint. Rock Ya-Sin and Amik Robertson are standing by if needed, but losing key starters for any stretch of time could test the depth chart in ways this defense hasn't had to face yet. And speaking of the defense, how about Aiden Hutchinson? Multiple sacks, relentless pressure, constant disruption. Joe Flacco had no breathing room, throwing 2 interceptions and dealing with duress on nearly every dropback. The Browns mustered just 82 rushing yards, with Judkins finding no real lanes. Jack Campbell was everywhere, 11 tackles, sideline-to-sideline dominance, exactly the type of performance you want to see from a first-round pick growing into his role. This wasn't just a good defensive game, it was a statement. 3 turnovers, a relentless pass rush, disciplined run defense, and clutch tackling. This defense isn't just reacting anymore, it's dictating games. Special teams? They showed up too. Beyond Raymond's return touchdown, the kicking game held strong, with 1 field goal so wild it looked like it was sailing wide before curving back through the uprights. Punting was improved, Coverage was sharp, and for once, this phase didn't feel like an afterthought, it felt like a weapon. In a matchup where field position mattered more than ever, the special teams unit delivered. Now let's zoom out. The Lions are 3-1. The Vikings lost, meaning Detroit sits atop the NFC North at this very moment. The Packers and Bears still need to play, but for now, this team holds the crown. A season that began with high expectations is starting to take shape exactly how fans dreamed it would. Yet, the feeling in this locker room isn't just excitement, it's hunger. There's still frustration about penalties, flags that stalled drives and killed momentum. There's still work to be done to sync up Goff and Williams. But imagine this, if the Lions can put up 34 points, dominate all three phases, and still walk away feeling like there's plenty to clean up, what does that say about this team's ceiling? Next week brings the Bengals, a banged-up Cincinnati team, with Jake Browning filling in at quarterback after the franchise star went down. On paper, the Lions should be favored. Their offense against one of the league's weaker defenses feels like a mismatch. Gibbs and Montgomery could feast, St. Brown should continue his hot streak, and Goff, if he finds rhythm, could light up the secondary. But that's the beauty of the NFL, nothing is guaranteed. It comes down to execution, to bringing the same fire that carried them past Cleveland, and proving that 3-1 isn't just a start, it's the beginning of something much bigger. So here's the question for all of you. After seeing this complete team performance, the turnovers, the 0 sacks, the defensive dominance, the special team spark, do you believe this Lions squad has what it takes to not just win the division, but to make a deep playoff run? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know what you think. If you stayed with me through the first part, you know how much this victory over Cleveland meant, but the deeper you look, the more fascinating details jump out. The way the Lions adapted, the resilience they showed, and the areas where they still need to tighten up. It all paints the picture of a team that's growing into something dangerous. And that's what makes this conversation with you, the fans, so important. Because this wasn't just about beating the Browns. It was about proving the Lions can impose their will against anyone. Let's circle back to that offensive line performance. 0 sacks allowed. That number tells the story, but the way it happened is even more impressive. Myles Garrett was lined up everywhere, inside, outside, constantly moving to create mismatches. And yes, he got his pressures, but Goff stayed upright the entire game. The offensive tackles, Taylor Decker and Penei Sewell, absorbed their share of hits, but they didn't fold. Graham Glasgow and the interior group kept the pocket firm just long enough for Goff to make plays. Against the defensive front considered untouchable, this unit stood tall. And when you start thinking about January football, you know playoff games are won in the trenches. This is exactly the kind of test that gives you confidence the Lions front five can go toe-to-toe with anyone. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, penalties. For as good as this game looked on the scoreboard, the yellow flags were everywhere. Drives stalled, field position flipped, and momentum was stolen because of those mistakes. It's the kind of detail that can turn a winnable playoff matchup into heartbreak. Dan Campbell knows this. He'll hammer it home in practice. But it's also part of the culture the Lions are still building, aggressive football without crossing the line into sloppy execution. The fact that Detroit won by 24 despite shooting themselves in the foot with penalties only proves how high the ceiling really is when they clean things up. On the other side of the ball, the defensive backfield deserves recognition, even with the injuries. Terrion Arnold's absence was noticeable, and DJ Reed's hamstring scare left everyone holding their breath. Yet, the secondary held up. Rock Ya-Sin and Amick Robertson are reliable enough to plug gaps if needed, and that's the type of depth championship teams rely on. You don't get through a full NFL season without leaning on the next man up. This game served as a reminder that Detroit's front office built not just stars, but a roster layered with insurance policies at key positions. And let's not overlook the psychological factor here. The Browns' defense came in with a reputation, dominant, suffocating, unbreakable. To dismantle that reputation, even for one afternoon, does something to your locker room. It breeds belief. It tells every player, we belong with the best. That kind of confidence doesn't fade overnight. It lingers, fuels preparation, and turns good teams into great ones. Detroit fans have been waiting years for that swagger, and now it feels like it's here. Then there's the NFC North picture. At 3-1 with the Vikings stumbling, the Lions control their destiny early. But we've seen seasons unravel before. The challenge now is consistency. Can they bring this energy week in, week out? Can Goff and Jameson Williams find chemistry before it matters most? Because let's face it, when defense is keying on St. Brown in the playoffs, someone else has to step up. Whether it's Williams, Josh Reynolds, Sam Laporta, or Gibbs out of the backfield, the Lions will need that secondary spark. Games like this one highlight how dangerous Detroit already is, but also where they still need to evolve. Special teams can't be overlooked in that conversation either. Khalif Raymond's return touchdown wasn't just a highlight, it was a momentum shifter. In a league where games are often decided by field position and one-score margins, a play like that can be the difference between heartbreak and celebration. If this unit continues to sharpen up, it gives the Lions an extra edge that so many teams lack. And let's not forget that crazy field goal, hooking one way and sneaking back inside the posts. Sometimes you need a little bit of magic, and Detroit got it in all three phases on Sunday. Looking ahead, the Bengals matchup offers a very different test. Cincinnati's defense is vulnerable, their quarterback situation shaky, but that's exactly why this game could be dangerous. The Lions can't afford to play down to their competition. Instead, this is the chance to show maturity, handle business, play clean, and step into October with a commanding 4-1 record. Momentum is everything in football. Stringing wins together builds rhythm, and rhythm builds identity. Right now, the Lions' identity is starting to crystallize: physical, opportunistic, balanced, and relentless. And this is where I turn to you, the fans. You've seen the highs and the lows. You know how many times this franchise has flirted with potential only to come up short. But after dismantling Cleveland, do you feel like this team is different? Do you believe these Lions have turned the corner, not just into contenders, but into a team that can bring postseason football back to Detroit in a way we've never experienced? Drop your thoughts, your optimism, your doubts. I want to hear it all. Because right now, the roar of this team is growing louder, and the question is simple. Are we watching the birth of something historic? What makes this win so compelling is that it wasn't about a single star carrying the load. It was a full roster effort.